use to our advantage is kids' natural curiosity. Like at some point, your child's going to start noticing that money is this thing that you're using to trade for goods or services. They're going to notice it. They're going to talk about it. They're going to ask you questions about it, or maybe they'll just look at you a little bit more closely when you take your card and you tap to pay something. So as far as like what age, it's whatever age they start showing an interest or a curiosity in what's happening. So that could usually happen in those early, like, right around the time they're getting into elementary school, maybe kindergarten.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and intro our next guest. So please give a big round of applause for Clifton Corbin. Excited. Yes, so Clifton, how are you today?
I'm doing well, brother. I'm doing well. How you doing?
Loved hearing it. Thank you. I'm so well. So I read your bio. I'm sure everyone else is going to have the chance to read it and kind of hear who you are. But I love for my guests to kind of start off by telling a little bit about themselves, a little bit about their journey, and why they're here today. So do us a favor and let the listeners know who Clifton Corbin is.
Sure, thank you for that, and I'd be happy to tell you about my journey because I feel like it's one that I'm hoping some people can relate to. So I was really lucky as a young child. I had parents who were happy to talk to me about money. We talked about the earning, the saving pieces of it. And then I went off to university, and like way too many people, I got those early credit cards and had no idea what I was doing. As much as I talked to my parents about like earning and saving, we never really got into credit cards. We never really got into managing debt. We never really got into what wealth or any of those other pieces of financial literacy really is. So when I got those first credit cards, I didn't know what I was doing. I dove into debt. And it was tough. It was really tough. It took me a good couple of years to dig out of that hole. And when I looked back after I got out of it, and I was like, well, what happened there? How did someone who was so, curious about money as a youngster, how did someone like myself still manage to make such a mess of my finances? And I realized, well, part of the reason is, as much as I was happy, like my parents were happy to talk to me about money, we only ever talked about, like I said, those two parts of it. We only talked about the earning and maybe some of the saving, but we never got into what is debt and why do you want to manage your debt and how do you build wealth. We didn't get into the bigger subjects of like financial literacy as a whole. So that's kind of what I've been doing the last little while. I've been trying to speak to parents and young adults and kids, if at all possible, and give them the rest of the picture so that they hopefully get the experience and get some practice before they're out on their own, so they're able to manage their money in a more responsible way than I did, and hopefully avoid some of those money mistakes that I made. So that's kind of what I've been doing. It's what I'm about. I'm trying to help, like I said, prepare that next generation to really get a handle on their money so that they can really, hit the ground running. The last thing you want is for someone to be in like the shoes that I was in, where I finished my college degree and I actually felt like I was further behind than even when I started. So that's kind of what I do. That's kind of my thing.
Yeah, I can already see people's ears perking up right now who are listening, because everyone who's probably listening saying to themselves like, yep, that sounds just like me. That sounds just like me. And I attribute some of that to our generational situation, right? Because our parents were taught a specific way and they taught us. Their parents were taught, and we continue to go back, and everyone was taught a specific way. I remember my grandfather always telling me, son, if you can't buy it with cash, then you don't need it, right? But times change. We're in a credit world now and everything. And so they taught me what they thought were correct. And it was correct at the time, but things adjust, right? And for anyone listening, it doesn't, we're not on a, hey, you need to agree with what you hear today. It's just a different perspective to look at it way. And if we don't know something, then we don't know something, right? Until we do. So what would you kind of say is a starting point for parents right now if they've got a youngster in their home or a good age to start? I know the book talks about it, and we're going to get into that because something I did not know or did not understand, that in the book when I was reading, there's different age structures for different types of allowances. For an example, like my son, he's 8, and so like between 8 and 10, there's this sort of allowance, and then there's 10 and above. I was like, wow, I didn't know that. So, anyways, what are some thoughts on a good age time frame for parents to start talking, and maybe a first step for them to bring it to their kids?
Sure. So one of the things I like to say is like I'm a parent. I know parents are busy. The last thing I'm trying to do is give you more things to do with your kids. But when it comes to talking about money with kids, the one thing that we could all, use to our advantage is kids' natural curiosity. Like at some point, your child's going to start noticing that money is this thing that you're using to trade for goods or services. They're going to notice it. They're going to talk about it. They're going to ask you questions about it, or maybe they'll just look at you a little bit more closely when you take your card and you tap to pay something. So as far as like what age, it's whatever age they start showing an interest or a curiosity in what's happening. So that could usually happen in those early, like, right around the time they're getting into elementary school, maybe kindergarten, maybe grade 1, like around that 4 to 6 year old range, they will naturally start talking about it. Even younger, some younger kids will pick up on it too. And if you can, you just have to, it's all about bringing it to wherever they are. So you're not going to be talking about, interest rates and insurance with a 4 year old, but you can start talking to them about, well, this is why mommy and daddy go to work. We go to work so that we can earn some money. And the money we earn, we use it to buy our groceries. We use it to pay for our home. We use it to make sure the lights stay on. So you can have those conversations at an early age. And you don't even just have to do it with conversations. One of the things, especially for the younger ones, I talk about like just play games with them. Role playing games are a wonderful way to include and engage younger children in how money works in the world. So an example I use is if you're, you have let's say a 3 or 4 year old, some of my favorite memories of my little ones is when we were playing like restaurant or grocery store in their bedroom. You set up like a little play area in their bedroom, and now we're pretending that we're transacting and we're spending money. And why is this thing? Why are you trying to charge me $500 for a pretend strawberry? So we're talking about price gouging. So we're talking about all these things, and we're doing it in a fun way, and we're getting them, interested and curious, and we're building on some of the things that they've already learned to really engage them and get them a good sense of how money works in the world. And then, as you mentioned, as they get older, then you could start changing that conversation. You could start talking about, well, what would happen if you had a couple of dollars in your pocket right now? Would you save it? Would you invest it? What would you do with it? So, you mentioned the allowance. If it's possible, you could give them allowance, and now they get a chance to not just talk about money, but actually practice using money, saving some of it, spending some of it, hopefully learning how to delay gratification by not using all of it all at once. So there's different phases. And as they get older, you can even do a budget, which is great if you could say, hey, you're a teenager now, you've got a lot more sense about how money works in this world. I was going to spend this money, to buy you back to school clothing. I'm going to give it to you. You can manage it, and we'll see how you do. So you're giving them chances as they get older to practice using money. So hopefully, like, they don't have experiences like I had as a young adult, where I was dealing with money in a whole new realm that I had never experienced before. But if you can give them chances to experience it while they're younger, you could walk beside them. You can kind of hold their hand as they make the mistakes that everyone makes. But hopefully, they do it while they're at home with you, which just less risk involved there.
Right, you can kind of pick them up a little bit if they fall.
Exactly.
And I'm absolutely loving the read of the book, and we're going to jump into the book in a second. But it's opened my eyes to a few things also. And again, one of the things I always tell people when we talk on the show is, you want to take uh, advice, you want to take new things you've learned. It doesn't mean you have to apply everything that you learn, right? You can extract little pieces and say, wow, I can adjust to that. And starting in that money realm, like when you were speaking with your youngsters and you're charging your strawberries more money, one of the things that we do with our son is we do monopoly money. So we have like a little bank in which he earns money, and then he places it in there. And we started doing that because, of course, we would go to the store and he just, can I get this? Can I buy that? So we were like, let's try to see if we can teach him a little bit of what that means. And I attribute this to one of the statements that I hear often with most parents, especially in an African American family and culture, because that's what I grew up in. So that's what I know.
Same.
We say, I want to give my kids everything that I didn't have.
Mm.
And for me, that statement means you felt that you didn't get something, so that's what you want to give them. But I look at it and say, well, everything that you did not get made you who you are. It made you strong. It made you the strength. So I, in turn, want to teach my son everything I was not taught. I want him to learn, not about interest rates, kind of like you said, but to learn the money. So when we go to the store now, he asks for something. I'll say, how much money do you have? And he'll go, oh, and he tries to count it up, and he has his watch that he keeps his money on and says, okay, well, if you buy this now, you're not going to have X amount of money maybe for something later. And it touches on a little bit of what you spoke about in the book when you said something in reference to a no buy list, right? So you can give them um, uh, at whatever age range, but you don't want to put too much on a buy list. So, for example, I think there was something like 2 lists, and it spoke on like no buying of weapons or certain types of food. Where does that come from in your mindset of like, or how does that focus in on helping them understand that you can do whatever you want except these things, which happens in the real world?
So what you're speaking about specifically is, so I say, if you can give, if you've got the money in your budget to give an allowance, I do encourage it. Like, I think it's a great way to give your child a chance to practice. But at the other part here is that I want you to give them as much freedom with that allowance as you can, because I want them to go out and buy and use the money in a way that they want to. I want them to actually experience it. I want them to actually feel like it's their money to do whatever they want to do with. But at the same time, like, this doesn't take away from the fact that we're parents. We're parents first. Like, as much as I want you to give your child all these experiences, I'm never going to tell you to stop being a parent to them. So the do not buy list is, as a parent, you still need to put some boundaries around your child. As they get older, you could take some of that away. But as a youngster, you want to make sure that they're buying things that are appropriate. Like, so if you have, let's say, a rule in your family, like, we don't have weapons in our family, toy weapons, I'm talking about here, like play guns or knives or whatever. And as an example, some families have no problem with it, other families might. So if that's not something that's comfortable in your family, what I'm trying to have you do is set the expectations so that you're not bumping up against it later on when your child tries to buy something and you say, well, we don't want that in our house. And they're like, but I thought you said this was my money to do whatever I want with. So the rationale behind the do not buy list is so that you're giving them that autonomy. You're giving them that agency to use the money the way they want, but you're still setting up the expectations, because at the end of the day, you're their parent first. So I want that expectation, that groundwork laid, so that when they go out to try to buy or go out to try to spend or use their money the way they feel like they can and the way they want to, they know, these are the rules around what I can do. And like I said, and you're right, as as an adult, you don't have those boundaries around you. You might need to put them on yourself. And again, this could be something that you kind of draw on later on in life, where it's like, I might want to go out and spend all of my money, but it's probably not a good idea for me to do it. It might draw back to that idea of like, there's a do not buy list. Like, I need to have some boundaries around my money. But the idea for the do not buy list is really just making sure that the expectations are really clear and laid out between you and your child once you start that allowance practice, if you choose to do so.
Yeah, great points there, because I can only imagine how, as parents, right, like you said, parents first and before anything, how we're trying to work and structure to take away generational, and not curses, but generational habits. And so it plays a little part into our mind that we're thinking, well, okay, so okay, for example, I'll use myself for an example, right? So anyone out there who's listening won't be thinking I'm talking directly about them. Like, you're in church and you feel like the pastor's talking about you, right? No. um, I was raised in a certain format, and I've learned, and in my adult life, and I see things, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing similar things that my parents did. They spent money this way. It's like, I need to structure that. But then I start thinking, I might be messing my son up for when he's 30, he's 40. He's gonna look back, well, my dad and mom did this. So I'm walking that fine line. And then that to me goes into kind of like chores, right? I know there's listeners out there right now and they're saying, yeah, but how do they earn money? Do I just give it to them, or do I give them money for doing chores? And that's a part in the book. And ladies and gentlemen who are listening, so the book title is Your Kids, Their Money, right? And we're going to we're giving you little tidbits. We're not giving you everything because we want you to get the book so you can learn a little bit about this. But in the book, we're talking about chores, and there's a percentage of like 90 or more percent of people who agree or don't. And I'm just like, it is a tough decision. Where do you think, or how are some tips to use? Or what are your thoughts then, so the listeners can understand what are your thoughts on the chores and how do you kind of incorporate that into sliding the money into them?
Sure. So I want to start by saying, we're talking a lot about allowances, and I want to make sure folks out there recognize like an allowance works for some families, it doesn't work for others. The other part that I want to make sure folks know is that like what I'm about to say is what works in my family, but it might not work in yours. And
Yes.
the one thing people need to always remember is personal finance is personal first, right? So what works for you and your family may not work for me and mine, and that's okay. When we're talking about allowances, the thing I talk about, and the reason I talk so much about allowances is an allowance is a great tool to give your child a chance to practice using money. You've probably noticed me mention this a few times. Like, I'm trying to give your child opportunities to practice using money while they're at home in a safe space while they've got you there to help them out. Now, if we start tying allowances to chores, what happens if your child doesn't do the chore? Now they don't get the allowance. Now they lose the opportunity to practice. This is why I don't like tying allowance to chores. I use the example of, if you have your child practicing piano, for example, or some other activity, well, if they don't clean up their room, do you tell them they don't have to play piano? And if you do, then maybe you don't give them an allowance if they don't do their chores. But for me, the practice comes first. Like, I want them to have opportunities to practice, and I don't want to take that away if they didn't do the chore, because now I'm losing twice. I'm losing because they didn't do the chore, and I'm losing because now they don't have the chance to practice using money. The other piece of it is, at some point, your child's going to get to the point where they're like, well, you know what? I don't want to do my chore. I'm not going to do it. And now again, they're not getting that allowance. They're not getting that chance to practice, and they're still not getting the chore done. So I really like to encourage folks, if you can, give the allowance, don't tie it to chores. And I know the pushback I usually get when I say this is that, well, then what's the values and the principles I'm teaching here? Am I teaching them that they can get money for nothing? Yes and no. Yes, in that you're giving them money, and you tell them, like I just told you, you're giving them money so that they can practice using money. With regards to, is money just going to grow on trees, and am I going to let them, are they really going to get a work ethic by just me giving them an allowance? Well, no, but if you don't give them too much, they will probably still need to go out and get more. So there's opportunities there for them to go out and start earning money, whether that be, shoveling sidewalks or raking leaves or what have you. So I don't want you to give them so much money that they don't still feel the need to go out and earn more for those bigger ticket items. I'm encouraging you to give them something, but don't give them everything. That kind of goes back to what you were saying a moment ago about, we wanting to give our kids everything, but we give them enough so that they can, hopefully have some chances to practice, but they still feel that need, if they want to buy some of those bigger ticket items, to go out and earn more. And that way you kind of mix both of them together. Because I really say, like, those first jobs will teach your kid work ethic, right? Like, if they start a job at McDonald's, they'll get that. They'll, like, if they don't show up, if they don't do their work, their boss will fire them, and they will learn. What I'm trying to encourage with the allowance isn't that you're teaching them work ethic, that you're giving them opportunity to practice using money, practice saving, practice donating, practice giving, practice transacting, practice just handling money, especially for the younger ones, just handling, holding, counting change, doing the math for it. All of that is a valuable skill that they can learn if they have access to money. There's another piece of this that I think is really valuable. We talk a lot about, having our kids delay gratification, right? Like, we want our kids to be able to not feel like they need to go out and spend everything right away. Well, if they're not sure if they're going to get more money, they will feel that urge to spend it because they don't know if they're ever going to get any more. So by giving them an allowance and letting them know they're going to get it regardless, it gives them a chance to practice that habit of saving or waiting for the next payment to then go out and buy the bigger ticket item and not feeling like they just need to go and spend it all at once. So there's a lot of value in giving the allowance and not tying it to chores. I say all that, and I'm going to put the same caveat I put at the beginning right at the end. Right. What works for your family is what works for your family. But what I'm asking is that you focus on teaching your kids how to manage money, because it's a life skill that they need, and they're not going to get it in school. And if they don't get it from you, they're not going to get it with the same values and principles you attach to it. And your values matter, and they matter especially when it comes to, passing that on to the next generation. So do it in the way that makes the most sense for you. I can only give you, some of the research and the data that I've seen, and that's what I'm giving you here. So, but at the end of the day, what matters more than whether you tie it to chores, don't tie it to chores, give them allowance, give them a budget, it's you're giving them opportunities to practice, you're being intentional with it, and you're focusing on that part of their education.
Love it, love it. It's like you're dropping those little gems on it, and I'm really appreciative of it, because I know there are people out there who are eager to learn things that sometimes we just don't know where to start. One place you can start is by picking up the book, right? You could go, and we're going to tell you some of the places in a second of where you can get it. But your kids, their money, it's a parent's guide to raising financially literate children. It is something that once I started reading it, I would ask my wife little tidbits and questions within it, and it would make her think. She's like, I never thought of things like that. Like even down to a small thing of whether within those chores, if you decide to do it, it's almost like, well, it becomes forced activities. We're forcing them to do something that maybe they don't want to do. And I am almost not on the opposite end, but I'm almost on another end of it. But I think that's only because that's how I was raised. I was a small country boy, and I'm out on the farm, so we were working, and so we tied mentally that into the money, and at a younger age though. And now that I'm an adult and I'm really opening my mind to thinking some of these, I don't say childhood traumas, but childhood, relations that happen, it goes into your adulthood, and we don't even see that, right? And my son, he came to me a while back, and he said, Dad, I want to go clean the backyard a little bit, but I'm only going to do it for $7. And so it kind of is counterintuitive to what you were speaking of a second ago, because I have now kind of gave him that idea that it's, oh man, what am I trying to say here? That
you've made the connection between work and money, which is a beautiful thing. Like that, and it's kind of what I was mentioning a moment ago. Like by doing the allowance, you might feel like you're breaking that connection, but by focusing on how you earn and what the child does and how money works in the world, you've built that connection, which is great. It's I've had similar experiences with my son. He's got a small baking business. Like he makes baked goods. He does it from scratch. I stand back and watch. Like when he was younger, I'd help and all the rest, but he's 10 years old now. He can work the kitchen as well as anyone. So he makes his baked goods. He sells it at farmers markets. He does, yard work around the neighborhood for our neighbors and gets paid. He makes more money some weeks than I do selling my books. So he's doing fine, but it's because we've had these conversations from a young age, and he's motivated, and he gets an allowance, but he doesn't get that much from me. So he knows if he wants to go out and buy that, super big Pokemon pack, he's got to get some more money into the coffers if he wants to. And the beautiful thing is, now that he's getting older, we get to start talking about some of these, maybe more advanced subjects like investments. So he was able to buy his first mutual fund, not mine, his money that he used to get it. But he's also seen that fund go down because things have been pretty rocky lately. But I've been able to talk to him about, now we can do some dollar cost averaging, right? So you bought it when it was high, you buy it when it's low. Now the average cost of both of those is a little bit more in your favor. So the idea is that you're talking about it and you're stacking knowledge on knowledge, right? So what you've done with your son, it's a great building block that you could just keep adding and adding to.
Yeah, and from that I said, well, I think it's time to teach him a new lesson. So I said, let's negotiate.
Yeah, I love it.
How about you do it for $3? And he's like, okay, Dad. I was like, man, okay, we got to get you a little bit stronger, right? So let's tell the folks a little bit about the book, why you started it, where it kind of garnered from, and maybe where they can find it. Just plug away. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So Your Kids, Their Money. It's a parent's guide to raising financially literate children. I kind of told you already, like I had some serious debt problems when I was a child. Well, not a child, but a young adult. And looking back, I recognize as much as my parents were willing to talk to me about money, they just didn't have that full picture. So this book is my attempt to help other young adults and parents, have that full picture so that they can, one, understand it themselves and feel comfortable and confident talking about money with their kids, and two, get that information into the kids' hands so that they know what and how money works and how they can maximize the money that they make. So the book is really I've kind of broken it into two different ways. So if you're looking just for like a resource, your child asked you about, like, I don't understand a credit card, or what is wealth, and how do I use what I've heard someone talk about insurance, I don't understand, and you could just go to those sections and just read that quick section, and you'll pick up some little pieces there, some language that we'll be able to use with your child. Maybe you can flip to some of the ends of the sections. There's extra activities and tools and tips that you can use with your kids. But at the same time, I've also tried to make it not like a lesson. So it's not something that you would read and feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just being lectured, because that's, no one wants that. So the book really, if you read it from end to end, it's kind of the story arc of my life, with lots of stories about what I've done in my life and how things have gone well and how things have gone not so well. But if you read it from end to end, it kind of starts with my interest in money at the beginning of my life, and it kind of goes into my debt troubles, and it kind of gets you to where I am now, where I'm very grateful for what I'm doing. I'm very appreciative of all the blessings that I've had in my life, and how even by giving back and donating and having appreciation can be part of the financial literacy education that you provide to your kids. So yeah, the book is available on Amazon. You can get it on Audible. There's an Audible version. There's a Kindle version. You can get it at Barnes and Noble online. So there's Apple Books. I think it's on Google Books. So it's kind of almost anywhere you can find a book. There's the paperback, the digital, and the audio version. So if you like to listen, you can listen to it. If you want to actually have it and hold it as a resource, it's there for you too.
Yeah, love it. Man, ladies and gentlemen, pick this up, even if nothing else, but to maybe understand a little bit of different ways of money for yourself, right? Because as one of the main things that we wanted to do as parents is we want to set up our kids, our families, for a little bit of an ease in life. We know life is going to throw them every curveball, right? But we want to give them as much as possible. And this is one of the starting points. Money, it is everything. We know nothing in this world runs without it. But if we learn to help it work for us, then it becomes a little bit easier. So, any final parting words you want to say to someone out there who's probably listening right now in traffic, on their way to work, thinking to themselves, how am I going to get this gift for my kid? Or just any final parting words you want to depart for someone?
Sure. One of the things I often talk to parents about is stories. Stories. Tell your financial stories. Tell your money stories. Tell your kids about, the first time you got a job, the first time you lost a job. Tell them stories about, your parents and their grandparents, and just tell them stories, because kids learn through stories. So much so that if you want, I've got a book for each age group with regards to like financial literacy books. So like they're like money books for kids. So I've got one for like the preschooler, the toddler, the high schooler. So if you go to my website, Clifton Corbin /book list, you can find a book for any age. And those stories will again help to reinforce some of this information. And just tell those stories. It's a great way to get your kids engaged. It's a great way to really connect with your kids. And it's a really great way to educate your kids as well.
Absolutely love it. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you go check out the website, the locations, Barnes and Nobles. Go look at the book. All of the websites and links, everything will be in the show notes. So you'll have a specific place to go look at those. And we sincerely appreciate you for coming on. Clifton, hold on for me 1 second. I'm going to just pay a little bills here with some sponsors, and then I'll be right back for you, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, another episode of J1Q. Just one question, right? That question could be anything. Today, it was, what are some ways that I can help adjust my kids and my mindset with money, right? So that question is broad, but we work in a kind of niche it down to helping you out. But most of all, I just want to say to you, keep pushing in life right now. No matter where you're at, keep working. Again, our goal here is to educate, inspire, and just kind of bring you some different resources on things that could basically help. And as I always say to you, make sure you keep living while you are alive.
Thank you for listening to Just One Question. I know you enjoyed the show because you made it this far. If you want to hear more, subscribe, share, and don't forget to give us a 5-star review. Now, what's your one question?